So we're now moving into the second part of this journey called Your Higher Self. And I'm going to do a quick little review of last week so that we keep hanging it all together, because some of this teaching is new. Some of the words are new, some of the concepts are new. But what we're finding as we embrace the new in a way that we may never have before, it allows us to begin to look at things a little bit differently. And I think today you're going to see it takes another shift higher. And I want you to forget those who can make it on Tuesday night, right here in the sanctuary from 7 to 8:30. We call it going deeper to go higher. We do. Last week was very interesting, the questions and the talk we had amongst ourselves. And then we always end with some form of meditation where we try to integrate everything that we're talking about. So we take today and then we move deeper understanding with many, many, many questions. And again, if those of you who don't have the book, it's okay. You're going to get enough from Sunday, and then if you come Tuesday, where we begin to integrate it and practice it. As I said the last couple of weeks, we're moving more and more into practice, experience. You know, one of the things I've learned as a minister, you can't do both. You can't study the divine and experience the divine. They're two separate things. I can study it all day long, all week long, and have absolutely no experience of the unconditional love. And I can tell you now, I'm about to finish 7 years of ministry, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks. And I spent all my time on the study side in the beginning. And I do less and less on the study side because I crave that experience. It's what changes my week. It's what changes my day. So as we look today, you're going to see, I think, another level of being able to do this. So I asked this question last week. What if life was really a sacred adventure? How many people do you know in your neighborhood or in your families that wake up every morning and say, oh yes, I'm on a sacred adventure? But what if it is? How exciting is that? You know, we have been trained in the West to be all about what we do, right? Go to the right colleges, get the right training, do. On the East, and as you know, I've studied both sides, on the East it's about being. You know, becoming Zen-like. And what's so unfortunate is that they were divided for all these centuries. And it's like either or, and it's not, it's and. You can do at the highest level and be at the same time. And I think that's the integration that we're seeing now in consciousness all over the world, because we have Eastern folks and their religion coming to the West and saying, you know, what you're doing here works and what you're doing here works. And what we're finding out, and you're going to hear this from me many times, one truth, many voices. There's one truth. How do you know what the truth is? You know inside. It's not my truth. It's not some preacher, minister, rabbi's, priest truth. It's your truth that matters. And how do you know that? You take it inside and you ask, is this true for me? If it's not, you set it aside. Move on. I know for myself, as I went through this process, 20 years ago I began to study this, it wasn't my truth at that time. I set it down and continued on. So, again, you're going to hear me that. What if our personal ascension is the true goal? How many of you stated that was a goal for you? How many of you even considered it was possible? For those of you who grew up in the church that said, well, only Jesus could do that. And we're going to see with what his words exactly are is not true. He said you can do it. And I can do it. But somehow we never thought we were worthy enough or good enough to be able to even make that a goal. But what if? I shared this picture the other day, and it's a picture I love because this is where I believe that it encompasses all the teachings. The teaching in Genesis is that you and I were made in the likeness and the image of the Almighty, right? That's what it says. We were not taught that. We were taught something else. we were not good enough to see ourselves build in that perfection and that unconditional love and that peace and joy, most of us say it's not even possible for us. But in this picture, I see the connection with the Godhead, and that each and every one of us are built in that likeness and image, and that's how we're connected in oneness. We hear all the time, you and I need to look at each other and love our oneness, be connected with each other. I look at you, we are not physically connected. There's distancing, right? But understanding it in the Spirit is that we are connected in the Creator, in the source that created us. We are all one. No matter how we show up and look here in the physical on this planet, we may look different. We may have different colors. We may have come from different cultures, different languages, different religions. But in source, in this very, very deep within our hearts, we are connected in spirit as one. And as you're going to see today, this provides a framework, at least it has for me, for a framework. You know, Jesus taught, love your enemies. How? No one ever taught how. Did they? No, when I had enemies, you know, I wanted to knock them into next Tuesday. Right? But the teaching was love them, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to love them. Now, how can I do that? If that is the teaching, I want to know the how-to, and I think you're going to see some of that today. So we looked at this chart of our divine self. All of that is you and me. We have the triune, the Trinity, within us just as it is in the divine. As above, so below. We were created in that likeness and image of God of source. And we talked a little bit about two of the images last week, and we're now going to talk about the one in the middle this week. The first one was the I am presence, the God within us. In each and every one of us. And I want you to understand that that's a chart in 2 dimensions, right? It doesn't exist in that. It exists in your being, in your consciousness. So those energies overlap. They overlap each other. I see it almost differently than that, in that the very core of us is that I am presence. What is I am presence? God said, my name is I am that I am. That's what he told Moses 6,000 years ago. And when we use that I am, we talked a whole bunch about that in the affirmations last week of how we use the I am what? Is how we use the God energy correctly or misuse it. Barry shared with us on Tuesday night that using the I am correctly is going back to our 4 agreements, as being impeccable with our words. It's a perfect connection. But when we use it, I am sick, it's a misuse of this energy, life force, that flows through us. And we create that then. In the law of attraction of the universe, when I say I am sick, what's coming? Circular universe, comeback universe, boomerang universe, whatever you want to use for those words. But whatever I think and I state just as you do is what I live. And as I begin to understand that, I begin to change that. Now last week I gave you 2 meditations. We won't do them today. But some of you practice them because I got some emails and texts. The Om, which is the sound of creation. As you connect with that, you're connecting with the energy of creation. If you want to manifest something in your life, use that Om. Get connected with the energy and the sound of creation, and look what begins to happen. Just like we saw, God said, let there be light. And we're going to talk a little bit more about decrees today as we go on. This is the perfection within you. God is only good. Right? We all believe that, right? There's a teaching that God is both. It's not true. It truly is not true. God is only good, and if you and I were built and created in that image, you and I can only be good. You say, well, Reverend Dan, I see a lot of people, not me, of course, but other people who don't act so good. Isn't it interesting how we can pick up everybody else's stuff? Everybody else is nothing but a mirror to you and me. If you see something in them, I see someone, I see a jerk, I'm just connecting with the jerkiness within me. You say, well, how can that be true? Well, if I couldn't recognize jerkiness within me, I certainly couldn't recognize it in them. Right? So everybody in our relationships, in our lives, are nothing but mirrors back to what's going on inside of us. No judgment, no condemnation of ourselves. We get to do what? Choose chocolate, vanilla. And all we have to do is recognize, say, you know what, right now I'm really judging that person. I'm feeling jerkiness. No condemnation, no judgment. Feel it. I feel the jerkiness. But I have the power to choose something else now. That's how you switch it. You don't beat yourself up. You don't judge yourself. You don't condemn yourself. You simply go, hey, you know what? We're all equal. Oh, that feels better. And almost every negative observation of someone else is a call for love from you and me. How do I turn it around? I love myself. Master teacher said this. Jesus said this. Love them as you love yourself. That means you got to first love yourself so you have something to give. And you can change it immediately in that moment and just say simply, you know what? I really do love myself. It's okay. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to drop that. And what happens when you begin, and it really doesn't matter what you love. You can love your dog, you can love the trees, you can love other people, you can love yourself. And all of a sudden you're in love. And that energy shifts completely from the judgment. And that's a way we can do it on the fly and move. We are nothing but good inside. And so in that picture, the last item on a figure on the bottom was us in the physical. Surrounded by this violet fire, we're going to talk more about that in the next couple of weeks. But it's our soul that is encapsulated in a physical body. It's good to know this because when our time is complete here on this earth, and we've gone through all the lessons we have on the classroom, we're going to leave. Everyone who comes in does. It's not a really big deal. You ever notice how humans make such a big difference between birth and death? It's all the same. It's a transition of energy from spirit into the physical, and when we're done here in this classroom, we leave. And we leave with everything that we have, the soul and the causal body and everything we see in this chart. And all we drop is this physical body. All of the rest of us stays intact. That's why, our teaching here is that there is no death. There's only a transition back to spirit. And when we understand that, all that fear that's been built around, oh no, when is my physical death going to happen? Hey, it's okay. It's just transition. You aren't going anywhere. You're still going to be around. My dad transitioned 2 years ago. Well, I have this thing with my dad. He loved cardinals. Every time I'm walking Nilla in the park, I see cardinals. Many of them. Sometimes 6 and 8 of them. And I laugh and I say, hey, Dad, you're showing up big time today. He didn't go anywhere. I communicate with him all the time. Actually, our relationship's better now than it was. Interesting, isn't it? But he got done with his lesson, right? For why he was here. And he's on to something bigger and better, and I'm so happy for him because none of the physical and mental stuff he was going through exists anymore. Emerson said this, when we are ready to let go of our God of dogma and of words and release that, we open up to the fire, the experience, the true essence of it within our hearts. I like to look for people who got this, who connected, that didn't line up just in the religious segments, but actually saw it from a different place. But this is what comes out of Matthew, is that you will be baptized. Remember, we talked about that the other week. Immersed in Holy Spirit. I would use holy energy right now, and fire. What the master teacher taught 2,000 years ago was not some wimpy stuff. He was talking about things that will change your life from the inside out and will allow that all of this negativity and the ego and whatever is there to be burned up, he said, so that you get cleaned out. Well, we're going to see as we begin walking through this process what happens. So now let's get to the chart in the middle. It's called our Holy Christ Self, or Higher Self, or True Self. Or if you're in the East and you're Buddhist, it would be called Buddha nature, or Hindu, it would be called Krishna consciousness. One truth, many voices. Different religions, different cultures, but the same belief system. And as you begin to understand this, it begins to change the way you approach your own life. This is my take on this. I know some of it's kind of paradoxical in the teaching, but this is how it works for me, and this is what I found really changed my understanding, but it also changed me. It changed who I was and the way I approach. Because the number one thing of teaching from Jesus, from Buddha, from Krishna, from whoever it was, Lao Tzu, is that you and I need to know how to connect with that incredible unconditional love, the divine love. That was the teachings. All the rest was just stuff, fluff. But it's how do we get connected with this love that is not human emotion. It's a force. It's an energy that created the whole universe. And that's what this is all about. So let's take a step toward it. So in this process, we look at it right now as our higher self is really the top two images. It's the I am presence of the divine and this Holy Christ self, or the mediator it's called. You and I in the physical is that lower figure. In the physical world, we have a body. We need the body. Remember, in the New Testament, it says the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. It's what holds it. It's what allows you and I to come here to this classroom of lessons, and it allows us to move our spirit, our soul, within this dense environment. And as I said, when we transition, then all of that goes back up and goes back to source, goes back to spirit. Daniel wrote a book called Saved by the Light. He had multiple near-death experiences that he documented. And it was interesting because his work, if you're interested in near-death experiences, and these are folks who come back from the other side of the veil and write and talk and teach from what they learned. And when he looked at this divine chart that I just showed you, one of his comments was that's exactly what he saw when he was on the other side of the veil. And he saw the different aspects and whatnot in spirit. And when he came back, he said, that's it. That's exactly the way it was. It's a book that I think you enjoy if you enjoy those kind of things. Again, it opens our minds to someone that came back, was experiencing what it was like on the other side, and for whatever reason, I guess their work here in the classroom wasn't done. NDEs, as it's called, or near-death experiences, are something you never heard of a lot, maybe 30, 40 years ago. But more and more people are having experiences, and it's acceptable now to talk about. Back in the day, it was like, yeah, no, that's just you're just imagining that. Well, we've had enough of them, and the ones that really has turned a lot of people into the possibility is the near-death experiences of young children. And when they come back and talk about the very same thing that he does, it's like, okay, maybe there's something here to this. And there's lots of books now being done about, especially with children. There's a couple people who have worked with all their work, and it's amazing how child after child with no connection, so young that they couldn't have a religious upbringing, and have the same story that seems to match up. But if you're interested, it's a good way to look into it. I want to go back to this concept that the kingdom of heaven is within you. The master teacher Jesus told us that. That was not new news. This was the teaching from Egypt 6,000 years ago. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and whoever shall know himself shall find it. What he was teaching, what Buddha taught, what Krishna taught was not new news. This was being taught way back in the Egyptian time. Now Jesus said it two different ways in the New Testament. The kingdom of God is within you, or the kingdom of heaven is within you. This is a teaching that is ignored, is it not? If you were raised like I was, kingdom of heaven was there. And it only happened after I died. That is not what the master teacher taught. It's not what Buddha taught. It's not what any spiritual teacher has ever taught. It's what some preachers began to preach. But the kingdom of God is within you. That's why I love this divine chart. Because it was the first time I could begin to understand how this might stack up within me. I said this last week when I went to Unity Ministerial School. I was there 3 years, and every instructor I had said, how do you know and get in contact with the kingdom of heaven within you? And they said, well, you need to pray and meditate. Well, that didn't help much. I need a little more specifics. But this is one way of getting connected with that truth within you, and I think when you do, things begin to change. I had to share this with you. It goes back to the picture I just showed. This comes out of 1 Corinthians. The sun has one kind of splendor, the moon another, and the stars another, and the stars differ from star in its splendor. That explains that to me. We're each a star. And we're each unique. There's 8.5 billion stars on this planet, and every one is unique, but yet the same. This is this paradox that spiritual journey gives us. You know, it's not either or, it's and. And we're connected, and we're made from the same source, and we are one, yet we are also unique. We have to open our minds to that, because we get locked in this narrow mind. It's got to be either this or that. No, it's and. You are a star. And your splendor is different than mine, and different from theirs, but still a star. So go into our Holy Christ self. In the middle of that, Christos is a Greek word for anointed one. One of the most difficult things that confuse so many of us is when they put Jesus and Christ together in one word. And nowhere in the Bible did they say, well, Jesus, the man, said this, or Christ said this. They ran them together, and it's very confusing for all of us. Like, well, which one was it? Was it the man or the Christ? The teaching, and what goes back long before Jesus was here 2,000 years ago, was that Christos meant you were anointed one. There were many Christos, long before 2,000 years ago. And never, 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 never did Jesus ever say, I'm an exception. He said, I'm an example. I'm here to show you the way. The way to what? To your anointing, to your Christos, becoming the Christ. He never ever said, I did it. He said the Father, and the Father in this example is the I am presence. That's what he called it, the Father. Later on, Paul called it the Christ. But that's the confusion that came. And the only begotten Son, quite honestly, and remember who wrote the Bible was all men, it should have been the only begotten offspring. Because if you have a father, mother, God, you're going to have offsprings that are going to be male and female. But again, it was written in a way that it meant only Jesus. It's not what it meant. It meant the Christ, the Christos, the anointed one, is the begotten offspring of the I am presence, or the Father, Mother, God. This is what Jesus' own words said. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth in me, who, the I am presence, the Christ within, the works that I did shall you do also, and greater than them you will do. That is not a man who's saying, I'm exception. That's not a man that says it's going to only be me. He's telling you and me that we can do exactly what he did and more. And that's why I put the ascension up there as a possible goal. He ascended when he was finished with his work here. You and I are told that we can also do that and more. And I accept that literally, because I've made that my goal. And it can be yours too. Because I believe that this is what was true when he said, I didn't do any of this. It was that what the divine within me did. So he came to show us the way back to source. He called it the Father. In this, we're calling it the I Am Presence. Why? Because that's the name God gave us. I am that I am. That's why he came. That's what he taught, was for us to find a way back to our source, back to our Creator, when we are separated from, and we create the separation in what? In the ego that we develop. And our ego is out of fear, and it disconnects us from source, edging God out. And when we make our decisions based upon that, we are not coming from a place of unconditional love, are we? We're coming from what's best for me, and the heck with everyone else. I got to go get what's mine. That competition that we've been taught is nothing but egoic thought. It has nothing to do with oneness and has nothing to do with unconditional love. As you move into unconditional love, there's abundance. There's prosperity. There's enough for everyone. You know? I'm always taken when we move into this time of the year when the leaves are falling. I'm like, yeah, they're going to disappear and there's going to be nothing but bones and trees. But next year we're going to see millions upon millions of leaves again. There is nothing but abundance here. Except for my limiting lack, ego, out of fear that I don't think there'll be enough for me. But as I move more and more into loving myself and loving unconditionally and being loved and loving others, I'm realizing that there's total abundance for everyone. He came to show us the way to have the mind of Christ, the consciousness of Krishna, or the nature of Buddha. Every great spiritual teacher has taught this exactly the same way. We need to go back to source. And where is source? It's within us. It's not out there. We've been looking for it out there, haven't we? All of us. It ain't there. It's only within us as we get reconnected back to our source. So this second picture in the chart is a mediator. It's between the I Am Presence, or the complete divine, and where we are. And you're saying, well, why do I need a mediator? Here's why. The I Am Presence is 120 volts. You and I are 12 volts. If we had download directly from the I Am Presence 120 volts into that one of those appliances, what happens to the appliance? Blows up. Completely burned up. Right? So we're not at a place as we begin this practice or begin this journey where we are ready to take the download direct. And the mediator in there, that our Holy Christ Self or Buddha nature, mediates for us so that we can take in what we can take in. What I can take in is different than you can take in. We're unique, right? 8.5 billion uniqueness can only access the I Am Presence at the level where they are in their journey. But here's a belief that I have. We're all going to get there, folks. All of us are going to make it back to source. You know, one of the beliefs that I have is there's no sin and there's no guilt. We're inherently good. Every one of us are good. This came up on Tuesday night. It says, well, what about Hitler? Well, Hitler also had the divine with him. Didn't act it, did he? Does he have karma for the 6 million Jews that he... Yeah. I'm glad I don't have his karma. But inside that person was the same divine chart as my belief. Now, they talk about it as that I Am Presence is anywhere from 7 feet to 70. When the people who are 70 feet away, you don't see much light in them. You don't see much love. Right? But it's still there. Because God is absolute. It has to be absolutely in everyone, or not at all. And so that's how I've been able to understand that when I see someone in their behavior and I'm like, well, that isn't anywhere close to what Christ taught or Buddha taught. It's because they are where they are in their journey, and I can drop my judgment and enhance, embrace where they are in theirs. Learning to recognize the voice of our Holy Christ self enhances this aspect of our consciousness, moving to grace and mastery. When we listen, how many of you ever said to yourself, why didn't I listen? We all have, haven't we? Whether it was the job or the relationship. Afterwards we go, you know what? I heard not to do that. Why didn't I listen? And then we always say, well, next time I'm going to. And we don't always, the next time either. But that voice, that still small voice within us, is the mediator helping us stay on path, staying in the line of the light, so that we can get to the point where we go back to the I am presence or source. Was that voice loud or soft? Soft. When you hear the loud voice inside you, I bet you it's the ego. Want to get control. I know how to do this better. I'm going to tell you what to do this time, and if you follow this, I guarantee you that it'll be perfect. That's about the time you want to take a breath and get centered. And say, I want to listen to that quiet voice. And when it comes, you know. Right? We all know what that is. We all have it within us. And that's why way back in the Old Testament, King David said, be still and know I am God. We can only get connected with that still voice, that small voice in the quiet, not in all the noise. So where do we connect with the divine? We connect with the divine in our heart. This teaching enhanced this for me because he talks about in our heart chakra, which we've been doing work in our chakras and balancing those. But within our heart chakra, there's a threefold flame, it's called. And it's a direct energy from God, from source. And it's in every human being. It's there when you're in the womb before you're born. And they say in the very beginning, it's like 1/16 of an inch. It's that small, it's that unknown. But as you get connected with it, and you say, I want to get more connected with that unconditional love that's within me, it begins to expand in your consciousness. And you will actually begin to experience this flame, these threefold flames. But and the teaching is it's how God, another way to look at it is the God seed within your heart. That perfection of the divine lies within each and every one of them. And as we give it more energy, as we give it more awareness, it begins to grow. Jesus, the master teacher, said this, and this is what I think he was talking about in his way 2,000 years ago. Enter into the closet. Go into that quiet place within your heart, shut the door, and speak to the Father, the I am presence, in secret, not out loud. That's where we begin to reconnect. That's where we begin to get the downloads of what is right for us to do. In that still small voice will happen in that secret chamber within. It has three flames, or colors blue, yellow, and pink. And the blue stands for, again, the Trinity, the Father, or power. The yellow in the middle stands for the Son, or the offspring, as I call it. That's wisdom. And the right side is pink. That's unconditional love, or represents the Holy Spirit. But here's what's interesting. It shows up in the Bhagavad Gita. As blue is Brahma, another word for God, for theirs. Yellow is Vishnu, and pink is Shiva. So again, it doesn't matter what the religion is or the culture. These teachings of truth show up. What matters is, are you connected to it? Are you actually experiencing it within you? So the threefold flame is our soul's passport to immortality, or back to pure spirit. Now here's a teaching they have, which I have not heard before, which makes more sense to me than many things that I've been taught. Our soul becomes mortal when it's in the physical. It's almost like our soul splits. Part of our soul stays in the higher self, and part of it enters the lower self. The part that's in the lower self has free will to choose, And that free will to choose is stop pursuing divinity within, stop listening to the Holy Christ Self or the I Am Presence, and go its own way. That's the journey, I believe, of the ego. And when we begin to separate, I cannot separate from the source. But I can believe that I am. I can feel that I am. And then it becomes true. But we can never, no matter what we do, if there's no sin, there's no guilt, we cannot separate ourselves from perfection. But as we begin this process, we begin to bring them back together. The soul must become fully bonded to the Christ Self before it can unite with the I Am Presence and the ascension and becomes immortal. So basically what we do is we work from the bottom up. Since we're at the bottom, as we begin to open up to the Holy Christ Self or the True Self, we begin to go higher. And as we go through the journey and get spiraling, we go higher and higher and higher to the point we become one back with Source. And that's what I believe every one of us goes through. I believe that's why we come to the classroom on life, to learn our lessons. And part of our lessons is to no longer be separated, but to be connected in oneness with our Source. Our job is to reconnect. So as we connect up, and what are we connecting with? We're becoming that unconditional love. Love not from the human side, but love from the divine side, without conditions. And they give this picture. It kind of looks like, whether it's the Buddha or Krishna or the Christ, completely enveloped in the flames within you. And that's how our soul becomes one again. That's the journey back to wholeness. We become anointed, we become Christed, we become the Christ consciousness, the Buddha nature, the path to ascend. We become unconditional love. We become whole again. I know this is a lot today, and there's a lot of different pictures and a lot of different words and a lot of different concepts. But what I would say to you, and that's one of the reasons we put it on YouTube if you want to go back or come Tuesday, but as you begin, my experience as I began to embrace this, I began to feel the threefold flame within my own heart. And I began to feel the connection with the Holy Christ Self, my higher self. Am I there? No, I got a lot of work to do. But I have a path, I have a path that I can walk. And I'm watching what happens as I begin to react to life differently. I'm beginning to react from a place of unconditional love that I never had before. And every one of us has that. And what I am learning is I learn to love myself unconditionally, I'm feeling more loved. And the more loved unconditionally I feel, the less from fear I come from. The less I feel separated from anyone else. The less I feel not safe and secure. It's in that divine love that we find our safety and our security. Einstein said this: you can't fix the problems of your life with the same mind that created it. Even he knew. We have tried, I have tried, my whole life to fix my life with my same mind that created my life. That wasn't the teaching of Jesus, wasn't the teaching of Buddha or Krishna. Their teaching was, put on the mind of the Christ and let that solve your problem. But I did all the work. I studied every NLP and hypnosis and all that mind work to try to solve my life from my mind that created this life. Einstein said you can't do it. He was right for me. It didn't work. And the master teacher, well, actually Paul said this later, his teaching of Jesus says, you want to put on the mind. Well, this is where I had all the problems in ministerial school. I kept saying, well, how do I put on the mind of Christ? If my mind isn't working, how do I get this? This is the only teaching that I know how to connect now with my Holy Christ Self and let that mind begin to be the mind that I live from. There's some nuances there and some subtleties, but if you're willing to try it, and I'm going to give you a decree at the end that I use that will help you do that. One last piece was in the chapter 2 I don't want to miss. It's the power of dynamic decrees. We introduced decreeing here. Here's why. When God spoke, let there be light, he spoke it out of his mouth. using the power center here, right? That's the science of the spoken word. That's why spoken words are so much more powerful than thinking words. And that's what decrees are all about. And you see this every week. So, and the master teacher did it. When Lazarus was dead, what did he do? He didn't pray. He didn't whisper. He yelled with a loud voice. He said, "Come on out. Get up. You're alive." So the teaching is very clear, and you're going to see it, and I show it every week. Also teaching coming out of the Old Testament when we decree a thing. Traditionally, we've been taught to speak to the divine in silence through prayer and meditation. Those are all good. I use them every day. This is not an either or. This is an and. This is an enhancement. If you want to create something, if you want to manifest, decree is the way to do it. Even more powerful are decrees given with the power of the spoken word. Decrees are like a cup of light. They open up our vehicle, our vessel, for a download, is what decrees do. Now, I talked a little bit about this Ascended Master Saint Germain that came to Mount Shasta and things in the past. And we'll talk about him more in the future because he has some really important things to say today and what's happened. But he says this: as soon as a decree is spoken, bands of angels rush forward to fulfill the command. It is seen in the spirit world that a decree is a command. And when you tie it back to Isaiah, God said this: ask me of anything you need in your life concerning my sons and daughters, and concerning the works of my hands, command ye me. 6,000 years ago we were taught this. But we haven't been doing it. And that's why decrees become so powerful, because it's a command into the spirit world, and as you see, bands of angels come to fulfill it. He also said this: as a decree is repeated, the sound waves are strengthened and the vibration intensifies. We did a whole series here not too long ago with the whole law of attraction and how we're each vibrational beings. This is one of the quickest ways to change your vibration. And as you change your vibration, you attract what the new vibration is. Again, it's into quantum physics and all those things that we now can prove through science. So this comes from Job. Thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee, and the light shall shine upon thy way. If you want light on your path this week, the fastest way to do that is a decree that I know. It's been a spiritual practice that has been ignored for many, many hundreds of years. But as you begin to integrate it, find some decrees that work for you. Do them every day. And every day you do it, energy accumulates. So the more you do this, as you saw, the more you repeat them, the more you bring into your being the things that you're looking for. So we've been doing some now for, 12, 13